Hello, good evening, welcome to Axiom Flux, Season 5, Episode 6. Tonight's topic's the Stansted 15. I'm your host for tonight, I'm PJ. On the panel we've got the Predator Jeff. Hi Jeff.
Evening.
Evening.
Hi PJ.
I'm doing good, thank you. We've got the Black Hole Bridger with us.
Way up me old mucker.
And Jouster.
Hello.
Hey Jouster. And Billy Boy.
Hello.
Hey, how we doing? We may have Stav, although he's not quite with us just yet. And possibly one or two others who may come on during the show tonight. So, wasn't the original planned topic for tonight, but it's one we've decided to go ahead with. And I was quite surprised by not noticing the little amount of awareness out there to do with tonight's topic, especially from members on this panel tonight, i.e. including Jeff, who didn't really know anything about it. I think, Black Hole, you said you weren't too sure on what it were all about.
No, I know the bit about it.
Well, let me just go through a short introductory of it. So, it's a group of activists who stopped a deportation flight from leaving the UK to Africa, it says 18 months ago. But they've been convicted of criminal charges linked to terrorism offences. And it's the so-called Stansted 15 say they were convinced the lives of the people on the flight would have been in danger if they had been deported. The case has put a sharp focus on the UK's commitment to protecting the human rights of asylum seekers. So tonight, I expect this to become part of a debate, as normally as episodes are just general discussions. But this one could, get a little bit interesting. So I'm going to play a little video. It's not too long. Hopefully you all see it. If you don't, you'll just have to wait and go back on, after it's done and watch it again. But hopefully the main members on the panel will see this video being played. So I'm going to play this and then return to the open discussion or debate.
It was 18 months ago that anti-deportation activists breached security at Stansted Airport and changed themselves to the aircraft to stop it taking off. They were charged with endangering an aerodrome, a criminal offence introduced after a bomb brought down a plane on the Scottish town of Lockerbie in 1988. This woman was about to be deported to Nigeria, despite living in the UK for 28 years and having offered proof that she had the right to stay. When she spoke to Al Jazeera, she said the protesters had saved her life.
Okay, mate.
Working okay here, PJ. I can see it all clear.
With the people, the government.
Maybe I need to refresh them.
Years I've been in this country.
Oh, something's happening.
Why do you want to deport me? I came to this country because I was heavily abused, if I wasn't in this country, I probably wouldn't be here sitting.
Defending the human rights of people, which the British government should have been protecting under international legal obligations, is what the protesters say they were attempting to do.
These flights are secretive, brutal and barely legal. I was deeply concerned about how the Home Office are deporting people who have ongoing claims.
It's frequently a horrendous shock for people when they arrive here and they're treated with disrespect and cruelty, systemic racism and brutality.
Over several years, successive British governments have created what's become known as the hostile environment, effectively blurring the lines between migrants and refugees and asylum seekers. It led to wrongful deportations of people from the Caribbean, known as the Windrush generation, and a refusal to allow child refugees in the French port of Calais to come to the UK to be reunited with family members. It also caused people trying to stop asylum seekers from being deported being charged with a criminal offence with a maximum life sentence.
Just give them a little wave as they go in.
The defendants in the case received much support throughout the trial and were often in tears after giving evidence. At least one of the people on board the flight has now been granted the right to stay in the UK. The government has now shifted deportation flights from commercial airports to a military base to stop any further protests. Sonia Gallego, Al Jazeera.
Alright, so let me just stop this video link. So apologies for those on the panel that didn't get to see that video. I don't know if you heard it. If you did, then at least you can go along with what you heard.
Yeah, it was a bit intermittent at this end, but we got the gist of it.
No worries. And I think we've got Stav who's just joined us.
I could see it okay, PJ, by the way. Evening, Stav, if you're here.
Cheers for that, Jeff. We'll just welcome Stav on the show. We're live on Axiom Flux, Stav. And he's got muted up, but several of you are muted up. I'm not sure if you're aware. Anyway, I'll move on. So that was source, credit the source of Al Jazeera on the 11th of December of this year, which was the video just shown. And I just want to move on now to an article that was today. I'm not going to get this up on the screen, however I will attach it in the description for the viewers to pick up and run with for whatever you want to do with it. But this is from The Guardian today, and it says, Stansted 15, we are not terrorists. No lives were at risk and we have no regrets. So this is two of the protesters convicted for preventing a deportation flight tell of their shock at the verdict. On a mild Tuesday night on 28th of March last year, a minibus containing 15 protesters inched up to the perimeter of Stansted Airport away from the public terminal and towards the cargo field. Shaking with adrenaline, they clutched the bolt cutters to rip a hole through the barbed wire fence and scattered across the tarmac. Within 8 minutes, their lives were changed forever. Last week, 623 days later, the Stansted 15, who that night had locked themselves onto a Titan Airways Boeing 767, which is secretly chartered by the Home Office, were convicted of terrorism offences at Chelmsford Crown Court. So these flights have got like names like ghost flights and several other names, which I might come across as I'm reading either this article or the next. So it says, it continues to say, the group of 9 women and 6 men had been protesting to stop the deportation of 60 vulnerable migrants to Ghana, Nigeria and Sierra Leone. The police initially charged the group with aggravated trespassing, an offence carrying a maximum 3-month custodial sentence. But the Attorney General, Jeremy Wright, granted permission to prosecute the group under the 1990 Aviation and Maritime Security Act, a law passed in response to the Lockerbie bombing in 1988. In February, they will face sentencing for endangering the safety of the airport, an offence that carries a maximum of life imprisonment. So in quotes, his response from, I think this is May McKeith, 33, says, I went numb. May McKeith, who spent 10 weeks in the dock with her co-defendants, I feel heartbroken that the jury, knowing all the information they did and everything we told them about why we did it and the facts of what happened, couldn't find us not guilty. It's been a huge endurance test, says Jyotsna Ram. There is a toll on all our physical and mental health. There was no personal gain for us. And 11 of the 60 passengers who were to be deported on the blocked aircraft now legally live in the UK, which the Stansted 15 counts as a triumph. Half of the Home Office immigration decisions are overturned on appeal, says McKeith, but the government are denying people that right. You can't appeal if you're deported first. We didn't put anyone's life in danger, says Ram. We were there for 10 hours. There is nothing to suggest we endangered anything or anyone. The police and staff were joking with us, laughing with us. They took chewing gum out of one of my co-defendants' mouth because it got stuck in her hair. They were helping. It was very friendly on the night, and no one who was present told us we were putting people in danger or what we were doing was dangerous. Last week's verdict was described by Amnesty International last week as a crushing blow for human rights in the UK, and attention has focused on the judge, Christopher Morgan, who told the jury to disregard all evidence put forward by the defendants that they had acted to stop human rights abuses. Instead, he instructed jurors to consider only whether there had been a real and material risk to the airport. I don't think, in brackets, the jury felt they had a choice when an authority figure presented it in the way they did. The judge introduced the phrase inherently dangerous, in quotes, in relation to what we did, says McKeith, but it was the Attorney General's decision, adds Ram, that dealt a major, unprecedented blow. We have asked through the Crown Prosecution Service, the courts, our MPs and Amnesty International who have written to ask what the Attorney General considered when it comes to the facts of our case, and why the charges were upped. She says, neither women admits to any regrets. The 15 were hosted by local families during the trial and supported by the Quakers, without whom, they say, it would have been impossible to even attend court every day. Relationships have been sorely tested and parents and loved ones have suffered. One member of the group is 8 months pregnant. Others have lost work. McKeith is sad about the impact on her mother too, who was in court almost every day. It's taken the wind out of her sails and I feel really bad for involving her. McKeith has spent most of her career working in climate change organisations. She grew up near Oxford and throughout her childhood went to weekly demonstrations at Campsfield House, an immigration detention prison, with her father an academic editor. I'm going to skip a bit of this article. I'm going to read it all. Just want to get the main bits to introduce the topic. And moving on to my next one. So there is another video which is just following on to what happened on that night 18 months ago. But this is the bit I want to read. It says, why did the activists take this action? So, charter flight removals, deportations, are one of the shadiest aspects of the UK's asylum and immigration process. Shielded from public oversight, information protected from freedom of information requests. Every month, these ghost flights forcibly remove people en masse from the UK. Charter flight removals, deportations can take place to Pakistan, Kosovo, Albania, Afghanistan, Nigeria, Ghana. Some of these take place monthly. At one point, charter flight removals or deportations were leaving for Afghanistan fortnightly. See more here in our summary, which will be in the description. You'll find the link at the end of the show. Charter flight routes are agreed between the UK and other states at the highest political and diplomatic levels. The Detained Voices blog captured some of the statements from people on that flight. This is just a few I'll read out. My ex-husband said he knows I am being deported and he's waiting for me. He's planning to kill me. If he kills me, who's going to look after my children? Both of my parents are in the UK. They are British. But they, in brackets the Home Office, want to deport me back to a place where I don't have anybody. Nobody hear our cry. We are crying. Please, we need to be rescued. Please, can anybody help us? My doctor confirmed that I didn't or wasn't fit to fly, and I did or was not fit to be detained here, and the Home Office wouldn't do anything about it. They didn't reply. They still want to force me to go back home. The Green Party has called on the CPS to drop the charges against protesters, with co-leader Jonathan Bartley stating these charges are trumped up and a disgrace. Shadow Home Secretary at the time, Diane Abbott, called for the end of the charter flights in a speech on Labour values and immigration policy. An end to charter flights was one of the demands from the 120 people on hunger strike at Yall's Wood Immigration Detention Centre. As a result of the group's actions last year, 34 of 57 people on board the charter flight were given a chance to continue their asylum claims. Moreover, as with the hunger strikes in Yallswood, they are putting themselves on the line to challenge one of the worst practices of our immigration system. So there was results. I think it said, as a result of the group's action last year, 34 of the 57 people on board the charter flight were given a chance to continue their asylum. So there has these people who have been, given right to remain since this took place. So I think that's enough information. Rest of it you can go and do that yourselves, but that should at least provide the panel members enough to hold a discussion debate for tonight. So I'm going to open the mic. Anybody got any thoughts?
It seems to me as if they're definitely pumping up the charges, like in the sense of using a sledgehammer to crack a nut.
Well, my thought on it personally, PJ, is that if these people had been found, have a genuine right to asylum, then their actions, the actions of the protesters, are basically justified. So they shouldn't. It should be both. It should be all or nothing. That's the way I see it. So they should let these social warriors out. If, however, these asylum claims were bogus and they did deserve to be deported, then those social justice warriors probably deserve whatever they get. So I think you should they should look at it from that point of view. That's the way I see it. I think is if one. I mean, they've been allowed to stay largely, haven't they? I think so. They did have genuine claims, in which case the social justice warriors were justified in what they did, probably. If it was genuine asylum claims, I think a lot of these sort of claims from a lot of these countries are bogus. And in fact, now from what I've heard, the people that are trying to push this mass immigration, they actually coach people on what to say when they get to the host country, if you like. They coach them on what to say to get around different things. And they know all about human rights laws. Before they come here, they're coached on human rights laws and they know how to play the system. So I think you've got to be very, very careful with these human rights laws, because they can leave a sort of gaping hole in our system and allow all sorts of people to just come in willy-nilly from whatever country, when in fact they're not true asylum. A lot of them are not true or genuine asylum seekers fleeing whatever political, persecution or whatever reason they're using. I think a lot of the time they're just economic migrants playing the system and milking it as much as possible. And they know exactly what to say. They're coached in it, a lot of them, and taught how to get around the system and fight it so that they can be allowed leave to remain, what they call leave to remain. Bit of an odd statement, that, isn't it? Leave to remain, because it's sort of like a contradiction in terms, but that's what they call it. So if they've been allowed indefinite leave to remain, and the legal system says that they've got a valid asylum claim, then I would say the social justice warriors were justified in what they did, and they should be released forthwith. Personally, I think it's heavy-handed tactics they've used anyway on these social justice warriors, and sort of life imprisonment for that. I think that's a bit over the top. Personally,
well, they've not been sentenced yet, Jack.
They've not been sentenced yet, no?
No, they're looking at life imprisonment.
Well, that's it. That's excessive fines and forfeitures, which in our constitution says that we should not have excessive fines, forfeitures, or unusual punishments. So I think that is an unusual punishment. Personally, I think that's over the top for what they did. However, I think probably they may have done something that was a bit dangerous. They certainly caused criminal damage to the fence if they bolt cuttered it to get into the airport, the airfield or whatever. So they're obviously in some sort of trouble, and justifiably in some sort of trouble there with criminal damage. And I think there's definitely needs to be something done, but certainly not life imprisonment for that, in my opinion. But that's the way I look at it. But I do say, and I maintain, that I think a lot of these claims come in from these places like Africa, Nigeria, Ghana, places like that. I think a lot of them are trumped up asylum claims, and I don't think they should be taken too seriously. A lot of them, in a lot of cases, I think a lot of it's economic migrants and stuff like that, to be honest. But that's my personal take on it, PJ.
Cheers for that, Jeff. Anybody else?
PJ. Right, okay. You got multiple issues with this. I would say, first of all, what were the circumstances that they were being deported for? Did they have criminal backgrounds? Oh, okay. All right then. I'll just say then. Right then. So,
But just for now, I'd rather you just have your opinion on what.
yeah. So I would say, without knowing the court case, I'm not going to know about that until, say, the transcripts or whatever, or a proper press release is done afterwards. But because it's it's still pretty brief, isn't it? It's only a general description.
I'm only wanting your initial
Yeah. I'm just saying. I would say full facts of the case are not really out there. In the video, the woman said she'd been in the country for 28 years. Again, what were the circumstances and why was she being deported after 28 years? Have they finally caught up with her? As regards to the issue of breaking into the airport, well, yeah, that's a highly risky issue because we're heightened with terrorist activities and whatever. And I would say if they're going to continue to do the deportation flights from a military airport, and if they try breaking through a fence like that, it might be a different circumstances where one of them is perceived as a terrorist, or they're shot or attacked by a police guard, army guard dog. That will be a different issue again. But it does heighten the issue that I was watching the video. I know it's a separate circumstances, but there was a girl activist on a flight trying to prevent a Afghani national being deported, where she didn't really know anything about what was going on, and it turns out he was a multiple sex offender being deported back to Afghanistan after serving a 6-year sentence. I think it was for child rape or whatever. And she claimed a victory, and the full facts came out afterwards. So no, unless they know exactly what the circumstances of each deportee is, then no, they're interfering with things they don't understand. That's all I've got to say.
Well, there's very little room for morals in any of this, as we know when you're treading on the face of the law. Especially recently, there's been quite a numerous cases that have quite wobbled me, thinking, how's that happened? But you start looking into it, and you just see that there's just no room for morals in any of it. It's not about that anymore. It's about what's down in paper on books. So I'm going to play another video. If anybody else has got any initial thoughts, then just shout up now. Otherwise, I'm going to play this video.
I don't know. Hi, PJ. Sorry,
Hey,
I'm late.
No worries, mate. Go on.
I don't know if this is working. Everybody's all a bit broken up, but to me on here tonight, I'm not sure.
Well, I'm hearing you nice and clear for now.
Yeah, same as Jeff. Just really, nobody knows on the individual cases of each asylum seeker's claim. If that woman was 20 odd years, it's obviously a clear overstay for the visa, and they do a disappearing act like most of them do. I'm not saying it's that case with her, but you don't you don't get to stay 20 odd years and then get fail an asylum claim, do you? Unless you've just been on hiding, like a lot of hundreds of thousands of miles in this country, they openly admit. As regards climbing, getting airside and strapping themselves to the jumbo jet, well, obviously, if they get a life sentence, that can't be too bad to them because they were quite clearly willing to risk their own lives. Now, if the pilot didn't know they were there and he took off, by the time he landed in Uganda or Mozambique or wherever he was going, they'd have been stone cold dead. Somebody would have been responsible for the death of those whatever they were, activists, and somebody would have copped it, like the pilot or airside crew, security, whatever.
No, I see what you're saying. It could have been a completely different situation than what we would have been looking at tonight. Yeah, we would have been doing an investigation into an airport. Yeah, we would. That's a good point. That stuff. Yeah. Anybody else? What about Bill?
I'm just very quickly.
Go on then.
The newspaper articles, The Guardian, which is a far left communistic, politically correct, endorsed by Labour people like Diane Abbott. I'll say no more. So there we are.
Have we got William on?
No? I'd like to make a brief point. As far as I'm aware, with this crazy UN open door policy or EU open door policy.
Oh, hold on, because that's slightly going off topic. Come on, let's get into the debate. Let me just play this video then, and then you can return to that, Jeff, yeah?
Oh, okay. All right.
All right, mate. All right, so this is an RT source. If you can't see it, Paul, just wait for end, mate, because I can still hear you on audio. So just hang on till it finishes.
Okay.
A group of British activists have been convicted for a stunt at London Stansted airport in which they blocked an aircraft from taking off. The charter flight was carrying failed immigration applicants for deportation. The following video shows the protesters in March last year lying on the ground at the airport tied to one another.
No borders, no nations, stop deportations.
Well, the activists known as the Stansted 15 cut the airport's perimeter fence and surrounded the plane. The undocumented immigrants on board were to be returned to Nigeria, Ghana and Sierra Leone. Following a 9-week trial, a jury found the protesters guilty of intentionally disrupting flight services at the airport. Well, since the charges are considered terror-related, the activists could technically face life imprisonment. The group will be sentenced at a later date. After the hearing, we spoke to one of them.
Along with 14 other people on March 28th last year, I cut through a fence at Stansted Airport, gained access to a very remote part of the airport and tied ourselves around a plane that was due to deport around 60 people to Nigeria and Ghana later that night. We were there for about 10 hours. We were eventually cut out and then arrested. We don't know what's going to happen, but what we do know is that this charge should never have been brought against us. It should never have been us on trial. It should have been the Home Office. It should have been that building just over there. This is ostensibly an anti-terror piece of legislation. That's what it was brought in for, and the fact that it's been used against peaceful protesters is remarkable. It's nonsensical. We need to continue the fight against the brutal, secretive, barbaric, barely legal charter flights, the ones that we targeted, and I guess that's the thing that's in our thoughts right now. That's what's at the forefront of our mind.
Well, authorities in the UK have been laying out their reasons for pursuing the conviction of the Stansted 15.
These people place themselves, the flight crew, airport personnel and police, at serious risk of injury, of even death due to their actions on the airfield. The Crown Prosecution Service worked with the police to build a strong case which reflected the criminality of the defendants' actions, regardless of their motivation.
Well, in the UK, many public figures, including MPs, have backed the activists and are calling on the government to stop the deportation flights. They're calling for activists to be spurred from prison, saying they should be supported not punished. While the protesters found themselves on the wrong side of the law, it's clear that many see their campaign as justified. We heard from political commentator David Vance and George Barda, a social justice campaigner.
Here we have one bunch of lawbreakers whinging because another bunch of lawbreakers are being deported. I'm not sure what the problem is here. It's not a question of taking a sledgehammer to break a nut. It's a question of enforcing the law. The fact is that they set out to break the law of which they were fully aware. And in this country, if you break the law, you pay the consequences.
13 of the people on that flight are still in this country, and a number have already been given an indefinite right to remain. We have a crazy system in this country where a so-called hostile environment was intentionally created by the previous Home Secretary, Theresa May, who's now the Prime Minister, and part of that has been, these barely legal flights that are clearly, brutal and uncompassionate, and many of the people on them still have open appeal. These people were acting to prevent people illegally being taken out of the country to horrible situations.
It's quite clear, given the countries from which they come from, that if they were seeking asylum, which of course they're not, because they've been defined as undocumented immigrants, i.e. illegal immigrants.
That's simply not true. A lot of them are asylum seekers.
Available safe country. If I can finish my point, I'd like to finish my point, please. So these people are quite clearly, and I'm sure George understands this, they are illegal immigrants. And I agree with George in one regard. It's a disgrace that this country takes so long to remove these people who should not be in this country in the first instance.
They should have been arrested as they were and probably charged with aggravated trespass, and then they have their day in court to make the case as to why they were acting to prevent further harm. And the problem in this case is that the judge effectively prevented the jury from considering their motivation. And so these people are being charged under a law that was brought in to deal with terrorism. And whatever your view of what these people have done, it was clearly not a terrorist act.
They were quite clearly aware of what they were doing, and now they have been found guilty. George comes on to cry and whine about it. Here's a bit of advice, George. Obey the law and there won't be any problems. Just like those who came here illegally and have now been rightly found to have been here illegally should also have obeyed the law.
The fact that David seems to ignore is the fact that these people, it has been proven since, were not all should not all have been detained and deported, because they've been allowed to stay since. And what else I think is incredibly important is that all the decent things that we have in this country did not come out of the generosity of power. The reason the law has changed over and over to become a more moral and decent and democratic thing is because people have broken it in peaceful, principled ways in the past. What I'm saying is not that these people should have been allowed to go home. They broke the law and they knew it. But they should have been charged with aggravated trespass, which is what they did. They cut through a so it's not just trespass, it's aggravated trespass, and they were prepared to face the charges for that. Instead, they were charged with anti-terror charges.
Yeah, and if that be the case, that might stop other such people breaking into airports, shackling themselves into aircraft and endangering human life. So quite frankly, regardless of how you want to call it, the penalty they pay is the right one.
Well, I'm sure it's mixed emotions on this topic for tonight, so let me get back to the room. How are we all doing?
Yeah, I could see that, okay.
I think they both had valid points. I would definitely say that they should be charged with criminal damage and aggravated trespass. That's without a shadow of a doubt.
Yeah.
Having said that, I like the point that the Yeti made, the one with the long hair. I like the point he made about, sometimes you've got to challenge things that you don't think are right, and sometimes you've got to break the law. Unfortunately, you have to break the law to challenge things that you consider to be injustices, because I think there's too much conformity in the world. And
but what's happening, far too many cases, exactly what he said and what I said, they're using a sledgehammer to break a nuts.
Oh, yeah, it's over the top. I mean, you can't give somebody life imprisonment. And I mean, what's this with terrorists? It's not a terrorist activity.
No way.
That is ridiculous. It's not terror.
Was you aware that you had, terrorists in UK like that? Because if that would have been somebody else from a different part of the country, I'm sure everybody would have known about it. So, I don't feel like
not really a
terrorist, not as
those
the
social
media would like me
justice
to
warriors.
feel as. Go on, say again.
What I'm saying is, PJ, those social justice warriors were not terrorists. So to be charged on terrorism grounds is just another of these stupid laws where they go over the top and like to iterate what Paul said about it smashing a nut with a sledgehammer. It's clearly over the top. I think, there's no need to do that to them. But having said that, if these people didn't have a legal right to remain, why the hell are they still here? Why did they allow them to remain? If they were illegal, for whatever reason, or they failed their asylum applications, they should have been removed. On the very next slide.
Protesters were right.
Hey, sorry, Paul.
Well, so to an extent, those protesters were right because there were innocent people being taken back to where they could be in harm.
They were, Paul, to some extent, but you can't ignore the fact that although they may have been trying to save lives, they put lives at risk.
Yeah, but it's still not terrorism. It's certainly, what would you consider to be terrorism? Causing terror. So, they weren't going out of their way to cause terror. They might have been irresponsible and putting lives at risk from shackling themselves to the plane. But probably, if anything, their own lives more than anybody else's.
They caused quite a lot of disruption that day. I would have loved to have known the amount of costs that, incurred from their protest. Because that would have been pretty hefty for airline to have dealt with. Which they probably would have just put it on insurances, which we're all going to have to pay for on his next flight.
Yeah, I can see they did cause a lot of disruption, a bit of damage and what have you. I think they've gone way over the top with it. What's it going to cost if people realise what it costs to keep these people in jail for a life, if they get life imprisonment or whatever? You're talking of hundreds of thousands of pounds. It costs about, and I don't think people realise this, it costs about 5,000 quid to keep one person in jail for a week. So, if it's costing £5,000 to keep, that's a massive bill on the taxpayer tab. I think maybe they should be given a fine to cover the damages that they caused, or compensation rather for the damages caused, and a fine, and maybe some community service or something like that. I think to keep them in prison is a bit irresponsible. It depends, I suppose. They could go on to, having said that, they could go on to do something other that could be dangerous. So I suppose you do have to take that into consideration. If they're social justice warriors, quite often social justice warriors do dangerous things and can be a bit irresponsible, but they are highlighting what they consider to be Home Office irregularities, if you like. And so I think also there should be definitely a look into what the Home Office is doing. Is it doing things lawfully and above board? So, that has to be looked into as well.
Yeah, what amazes me is the judge telling the jury to dismiss the reasons why they're doing it. Well, that is all part of the mitigating circumstances. And it just shows you now how the law is not bothering with any type of mitigating circumstances. It's so hot or cold, and that is it.
Yeah, I agree with that, Paul. Yeah, I agree 100% with your...
Now, to me, that is tyranny, when there's no mitigating circumstances taken into consideration, like loads of other things should be considered that are just not considered.
Well, if the Home Office aren't doing their job properly, or they're breaking certain rules or guidelines or whatever, then
yeah, but they get given the tools like
to them.
They get given the tools like Theresa May was in the Home Office, and she's put them tools in there so she can use now she's Prime Minister.
Right. Well, I think another thing as well is if any of these so-called alleged asylum seekers are actual lawbreakers, which has been mentioned, then I don't think they should be given automatic leave to remain in the UK, regardless of their asylum application. If they're law breakers,
totally agree with you. They've committed a criminal offence, and
sorry. Yeah, well, I think the term with immigration that they use, if I'm not mistaken, is indefinite leave to remain. That's what they call it.
Well, there's both, isn't there? There's leave and right to remain, but the word is indefinite, which means they can basically chuck you out at any point.
Well, indefinite is an unsubstantiated length of time.
Yeah.
The point is that I think if they've got a criminal record or anything like that, I think any asylum application should be denied automatically. If they're coming to live in this country, then I think they should be of good standing and moral people.
Well, if we're to get a Brexit, then these are the things that are going to be most talked about.
Well, this is why I did want to mention about the EU.
Go on then, Jeff. Fire away, mate.
With the EU, of course, you've got this open door policy, and with the Marrakesh Agreement, any of them can come here at any time, and they can even be lawbreakers. And there's absolutely nothing you can do, technically, to remove them. So it's a ridiculous state of affairs. And what with the UN Migration Pact, what the UN Migration Pact wants to do is to make it a human right for anybody to travel anywhere they want and emigrate to anywhere to anywhere they want, regardless. So they just want to open the borders to the whole world and let anybody go absolutely anywhere. And if you criticize migration, they will criminalize it, criminalize any criticism of migration in general. So it's a ridiculous state of affairs. You can't have a world like that with open borders. And, I mean, where are you going to go? If you wanted to emigrate, where would you go? You'd go to somewhere with the best quality welfare system. You'd go to somewhere with a good economy and things like that. So where's everybody going? They're all going to go to the same place, the place where they feel they're going to get the best freebies, because that's what they do. Economic migrants just want to get the freebies. They don't care about going to make that country a better country by working for it. No, they just want their freebies. They want their free council house. They want their free welfare checks and blah, blah, blah. So, you can't have an open door policy. Imagine if we were the best country and we had a fantastic welfare system, which I'm not saying is perfect, by the way, because it's not, because, pensioners get a diabolical treatment in this country, I believe. But imagine if we had this fantastic welfare system with loads of freebies and all the goodies and all the trimmings. Everybody's going to want to come here. Well, we're a small island, 66 million people is really breaking point for this country. And I think now we're at something like 75 million or something like that. So I don't know what the actual figures are. If you included all the illegals that are in this country, I think you'd probably be looking at about 76, 77 million. Now, that puts everything in that country under pressure. Housing, the roads, the council services, everything. You end up with gridlock on the roads and all sorts. It's unsustainable, it's impractical and illogical. Why anybody would allow that sort of thing to take place is ridiculous. I think the best way you can help immigrants, to be honest, is to help them in their own country. That's what I believe. So I don't agree with all this silly open door nonsense. It's ridiculous, it's unsustainable, and it shouldn't be acceptable at all in any modern civilization. I think you've got to be able to tick the right boxes. There needs to be heavy control on immigration. People got a job to come to. That's a tick in the box. That's fine. If they've got a trade, that's another tick in the box. If they've got quite a large amount of money. That's always been a good tick in the box because it shows that they can support themselves and they're not going to be a drain on the system. In fact, they probably put money into the economy if they've got a large amount of money. Like, you know, I think I read something recently where they're talking for after Brexit, if anybody wants to come to the UK, that they'll have to have at least £30,000 in the bank or £30,000 equivalent, which I think is you know, it's a good idea because
they already have
it's going
that.
to put money into the country.
They've already got that now, Jeff.
Sorry,
they've already got that now.
They've already got it. What? How can they have that?
You've got to prove that you can look after yourself, and you have to have so much money in your bank for a certain period of time. Be able to.
I don't think they'll be able to implement that until after we've managed to succeed outside the EU, with, you know, and left the EU properly, because we're under EU directives at the moment, which means anything goes. Anybody can come in. They can be lawbreakers. They can be anything you like, and you've got absolutely no control over it whatsoever. You know, if 500 million people suddenly decided they wanted to come to the UK, at the moment there is nothing we can do about it. You've just got this ridiculous, ludicrous open door policy with no controls whatsoever, which is unsustainable, as I've said. So, you know, these sort of things, hopefully, if we get the Brexit that we want, these sort of things will be able to be implemented. You'll be able to have other certain different things that they can put in place so that we get the right sort of people in the UK. And certainly, I would say, if you are going to make sure it's limited and ideally to people with skills that we've got a skill shortage of. I personally would like to see us being able to educate our own people. So we don't need, if we can educate our own people properly, we shouldn't need to bring in all these immigrants from other countries. We should be a self-sustainable nation. That would be my first choice, because I think you have to put your own people first in the country. And like I say, if you're going to have foreign aid anyway and give foreign aid to different countries, then help them in their own countries rather than letting them come here. That's my own personal take on it, PJ.
Anybody else?
Oh, am I on? Is it working?
Go on, Stav. Fire away, mate. Fire away.
Well, Beardy Weirdy on there and his Momentum University colleagues will want to be careful, because they may just get what they ask for. And when they get it, they won't like it. Because the trouble is with this country, right? We seem to have morphed into this socialist ideals and capitalistic values. Well, you're going to end up with neither, the way it's going. And I hope they'll be very happy in their little world when it comes about. We're already a long way down the track of that now anyway, and I don't think it's reversible personally. I think this is what all this crap's about with the EU and all the rest of it. The Marrakesh Agreement is just an endorsement of the United Nations Migration Pact, and like Jeff says, they're going to make it a human right. And that's right up the street of the severe left communistic people or whatever, but they won't like it when it comes, because all they've been doing, these little university graduates and prospectus graduates or whatever they want to call them, is they're being given some goodies, the Erasmus loans, so they can go around Europe screwing around, smoking dope and not bothering about working and all the rest of it. So, you know, yeah, they'll probably get what they want, but that, you know, they won't be getting exactly what they want.
In relation to the theory.
Go on, Jeff.
I was just getting the theory. Sorry, PJ. I was just going to say, in my opinion, you can either have open door immigration or you can have a welfare state. You cannot have both, because it doesn't work. It's like mixing oil and water. It doesn't work. So if they're doing this open door stuff, is the plan to crash the welfare system completely? Because that is what it will do ultimately. And I think, well, we need a welfare system to a certain degree for especially for people with disabilities, and obviously pensions for the elderly and people that can't work, the elderly, the infirm, and the disabled. So and people that for whatever reason haven't got a job. If you've got temporary unemployment issues or whatever going on, you have to have a safety net to a degree. So I don't think you can have that and the open door policy. I think it's ridiculous. If they keep going with the open door policy, the welfare system will collapse. Maybe that's what they intend to happen. Maybe that's what they want to do, collapse the welfare state entirely. I don't know. Just an idea. Could be one of the...
possible, Jeff. I mean, I can't help thinking that. I mean, there was one person in the article I read who stated that they was born here, and they were trying to, still get them out. And I just to think if they tried doing that to me, and here I am on this plane with 50, 60 other people, no way out, no one's going to help me. I mean, you'd be praying for people like these protesters, surely. I'm just trying to I'm just trying to get into their shoes and see, from a different point of view, but I don't know.
You're hardly going to get protesters. Let's just say you went.
But it could happen to anybody, Stav. Just imagine if they were going to deport you.
Hang on, PJ.
Go on then.
Let's reverse it. Right, you go on an extended visa to Nigeria. You meet a woman in Nigeria, you fall in love, and you can't extend the visa anymore. You've got to come home. So you do a runner with the woman, and you hop around Nigeria for 20 odd years, having a great life, a load of kids. Now you can't come back because your life is as a Nigerian, but there's only one problem: you're not a Nigerian. Right now, this is the shoe on the other foot, so to speak. Now, do you think there's going to be some social justice warriors in Nigeria do what these people have done here? The only reason why these people do this here, it's got nothing to do with human rights. It's because they're paid activists. It's as simple as that. They're paid to do that. They know full well they won't get a life sentence, otherwise they wouldn't have done it. It's all part and parcel of the EU plan and the open borders, globalistic.
We are yet to see stuff. I mean, you could. I guess you could say that they're not going to get a life sentence, but we can't actually confirm that until next year. It could be eating your words.
They're most likely not to get a life sentence, because by that time Marrakesh is signed, the pact's agreed, it's a human right, it's not an issue anymore. They'll put out an amnesty for the rest of the people that came here illegally, overextended their visas illegally, done a disappearing act, all illegal, and they'll be given an amnesty pardon. And none of this will ever come up again, and they won't be going to prison now, will they?
Well, that's a completely different view of looking at it. So let's try and round off this post then.
But
are you against the decision, the conviction of these 15 people, or are you all for it? Do you say it's fitting and just, or what?
What have they been convicted
Of a terrorism offence?
Have they been? Yeah, but have they been convicted and charged and put in prison for life? Is that all done, dusted?
They've got the same sentence in June next year, but they have all been found guilty.
What, been found guilty, and they're going to be? Why is it going to take 8 months, 7 months to carry out? To carry out their sentence.
It's funny they.
Why is it taking
because
that long?
Because
I mean, that's a bit suspicious.
This is a new thing. It's not been set before, has it? That's probably why.
It's funny.
No, hang on. If they've been found guilty, right, they should be convicted and sentenced. What's the hold up?
Because there's no previous case law to decide the length of sentencing and what they should get. So I imagine.
Well, they just said it's a life. Yeah, but they said it's a life.
No, it carries up to a life sentence.
Well, now, if it's never been a case law before.
You still don't stop.
I think we've lost him.
That's strange. His audio went. Oh, he's gone on mute. You've gone on mute, Stav, actually.
Just refresh.
Well, it's probably just...
Yeah, he's back. He's back. Continue.
It's just that, well, I'm saying this, Peter. How do they come up with this? Perhaps Jouster. I legally, I ain't got a clue. And I don't really want to know, to be honest. But I got an opinion on what's gone on and why I think it's gone on. That's about the reason why that event happened, who organised it, most probably, and all the rest of it. But you know, how comes, right? You say it's unprecedented. There's never been a case like this before. How can they stick a penalty of a life sentence against it if there's never been anything, if it's unprecedented, there's never been a case like this before? How can you make a conviction and penalty up, right, if there's never been a case before? Well, so when people say they could face a lifetime imprisonment, who says so? Why? Is there a case law to show you before?
Remember, Stav, is up to a life sentence. So, I mean, so it sounds to me like they are going to get a custodial sentence. By the sounds of it, they are going to get a custodial sentence. I agree that it shouldn't take so long. If they've already found them guilty and convicted them, then it shouldn't take too long to administer a sentence. Considering
the previous cases I've been looking at and how they've materialised and unfolded, and that the article stated that they had no regrets, I think that's the key crunch that is going to see them being sent to prison. For how long, I don't know. But if they'd have not said that, and they would have shown some, you know, some sincere apology, then they may have just got away with it. But I think they're looking at a sentence, to be honest.
Why are they bothered about a life sentence when they were willing to risk their life, their neck? Why are they worried about going to prison when they were willing to be tied up in the air, strapped to a jumbo jet? Why would they worry about prison? I don't get it.
If I was a judge, I would be looking at public safety first and foremost. And so, as such, if they've done this thing and they've put the general public at risk, I would, and they showed no remorse for their actions, and it looks quite likely that they could do something similar again at some point in the near future, then I would say yes, they will probably get a relatively heavy sentence because of the fact that they could do something similar like that again. That is what I would say. But I mean, apart from that, if they showed remorse and they said, sorry, we were irresponsible, we shouldn't have put public lives at risk or whatever, then as a judge, if they had no priors or anything, I would have probably given them, a suspended sentence, some community service and a fine to cover the damages, or compensation and a fine or something like that.
Well, it's the intent. It's the intent, isn't it?
I just think it's a big setup. It's just all a big setup.
Yeah, I agree with that.
I think my friend here, he's worked at an airport. And
yeah, and I'm telling you now,
the
right?
Securities
is absolutely shit hot. And most people have got onto that airfield, right? There would have been security there within minutes. They wouldn't have had time to tie themselves to an aeroplane.
He said eight minutes, were it? I think it said 7-8 minutes. There was the police arrived.
7 or 8 minutes.
I'll have to read the article again just to double check, but I think it did say 7-8 minutes.
I think he did say 8 minutes.
Yeah.
Dodgy.
You think that's dodgy? You think that's dodgy then, yeah?
Yeah, it's dodgy.
Well, it's not acceptable. It's not good enough for the British public. We want you there in seconds, not minutes.
I think, to be honest, I think they blow all the terrorism stuff totally out of proportion. I don't think we've got, you hear it about it on the news all the time, terrorist this, terrorist that. The actual chance of you being killed by a terrorist, you're more likely to be eaten by a bleeding shark or struck by lightning. It's so rare. Incredibly rare.
But what gets me, why was their case in court adjourned? And I think it was put in the handbag for when they wanted to use it, like everything that's going on now.
I think staff made a valid point, actually, that that I think there's people pulling the strings with this sort of thing in the background, and that could be the United Nations, it could be the banks, it could be George Soros. We know that they've done things like giving them MasterCards. They get coached on what to say when they come over here, like, you know, if they get questioned about their asylum or whatever, they claim human rights for this, that, and the other. They know exactly what they're doing. They're trained before they come here on how to deal with the British law system and exploit it using human rights, European human rights laws and stuff like that.
Yeah, I just wanted to add to what Paul's just said. I think they did actually state in the article the reasons why it got adjourned, although I wasn't too sure whether I read that out. I did skip quite a bit. Link will be in description.
I say it looked a bit evasive to me, to what they were saying, and why would it be adjourned? Why would the judge say you're not got to take it for the reasons why they done it, the mitigating circumstances? Why are they not in this court case?
Are they actually getting that represented by Amnesty, or are they not? The perpetrators are they under representation from Amnesty International?
No, I don't think so.
Well, they're either very foolish people and easily led by movements and organisations and NGOs to do these things, or, you know, it's one big setup because they know full well that what's coming, and like Jeff said, with the UN Migration Pact and all that, because none of this will matter anyway, because everybody will have a human right. Well, they say everybody, but I think it'll be all one way. It'll be all the third world country people have a human right to come anywhere, to go anywhere in the free Western world they like. And there won't be a damn thing anybody can do. They can be convicted, rapists, murderers, whatever, done their time, come out of prison in Nigeria and come across there under the Human Rights Act. And there'll be nothing anybody will be able to do about it. So good luck to everybody. I say, if that's what they want, that's what they want.
It just smells fishy to me, the whole debacle. I only found out about it today. Normally something like this would be really blown up, and now it's starting to be blown up now.
Well, like I said, it's been drowned with all Brexit and Yellow Vest and the terrorism shooting, alleged terrorism shooting, with the manhunt and goodness knows what else. So that's probably why. But I don't know. Has that been going on for 18 months? Yeah. Of course it has. It's probably why I didn't hear it, Paul and Jeff and everybody else. But I was surprised myself because when I'd not heard of it and I first come across it, I looked at it from the angle of, well, we've had terrorists in UK style for 18 months that I didn't even know about. Fair enough, they'd not been found guilty at that point, but still, they have now. So it's pretty fair to say that we had terrorists on UK soil for 18 months. Not many people knew about it. But if it had been somebody else from a different part of the world, I'm sure we would have all have known.
Terrorists without firearms or weapons.
Aye.
Terrorists without firearms or weapons.
Well, as far as I'm aware, we've got 23,000 jihadis living in the UK, and they're being watched, apparently. Where they've got the resources to watch these 23,000 jihadis when we've barely got that many police in this country now. So how the hell they're doing that is beyond me. The resources required to watch 23,000 jihadis is beyond me. But there you go. You know, it's sort of madness. The situation we got is totally ludicrous. I think there should be a lot more deportations, to be honest. As it is.
Yeah. Well, let's draw some conclusions then. Let me put it this way: in your mind, and I'm going to go through each one here. Who's the guilty one? Is it the Home Office or the Stansted 15?
I think probably both guilty. if I might say so, because if they've got some sort of due process, I think the Home Office has got to follow that due process. But having said that, the law to me is a complete ass anyway. So, maybe they're having to sidestep certain regulations and things to get around all this human rights crap, which I think is like over the top. So I would say definitely the activists are in the wrong, because they've criminally damaged property. You've got aggravated trespass. They've endangered public safety. So
you'd class that as a terrorism offence, yeah?
Oh, I wouldn't class it as a terror.
So then they're not guilty, then, are they? So you can't say they're guilty, but then
they're not guilty of terrorism. I think it's ridiculous to say that.
So that's what they've been convicted of. So they're either guilty or they're not. So that's what I'm asking you.
Of terrorism? No, not guilty.
Trespass, maybe, yes. Yeah, trespass. I may be aggravated trespass, but definitely not terrorism. It's so ridiculous. Talk about a hammer breaking a nut.
And criminal damage as well for using bolt cutters on a fence and what have you. So they should compensate the people responsible for maintaining the fences around the perimeter. And
what about the cost and inconvenience for the 10 hours that people were delayed for?
Yeah, but it's still not terrorism, is it?
Yeah, that's right.
I don't know. You try and bring down a major part of a country, and that can be sort of classed as it. I mean, there's only other places like power stations and things like that. If you start trespassing on their land, then that's reasonable to be expected to have armed anti-terrorist police.
I think to call it terrorism is on the same lines as saying box cutters.
Yeah, I don't think you can honestly.
And let me just remind you, let me just bring you back to the attention of this act was for the Lockerbie bombings, yeah? So keep that in mind as well.
They use these terrorism acts on absolutely everything nowadays, and it's ridiculous. It's over the top. They go over the top with it, PJ. Yeah. They play on these stupid...
Yeah, and to chuck the Lockerbie bombing in there, that's just bloody ridiculous.
Go on then, Paul, because I want somebody to bite at that. I thought you would have responded. But go on, Paul, seeing as you were the first one there.
It's absolutely ridiculous. They're putting akin to what those, how many was there? 15?
Yeah, 15 protesters, apparently. They called themselves, the
they're putting that down to the same level as a Lockerbie bombing, which is absolutely crazy, and no way are they terrorists.
Which was state-funded terrorism.
Yeah.
In Libya, what they say anyway.
Absolutely ridiculous. And I mean, people that believe that, I mean, they're in cloud cuckoo land. It's time they've got to face reality, for crying out loud.
I agree, Paul. I absolutely agree with you there.
I agree with you.
So hang on a minute. So can we extend it?
Hold on, because I was going to do that. I wanted to expand it, but I just want to get William's thoughts, because he's been a bit quiet, William. Are you still with us? If you are, unmute. If not, I'll move on with my next question.
You there, Billy boy?
Come on, Billy boy, Billy boy.
He's not unmuting, so I'll move on then. My next question is, how is that going to impact activism and activists from now on? Do you think that's going to spread out from other places where you don't even have to be on an airport?
Yeah, they're trying just to make any kind of activist boogeyman.
No, well, I think if activism is done in a way which makes sense, then that's one thing. But to do activism because it's a political party's agenda and you belong to these political party groups, I think is just a little bit hypocritical, and I just think. The activism that goes on in the world today is being promoted by agendas, really all around. That's how I look at it. So I don't actually think that, you know, there's very few genuine activists out there. They're all paid for, and it's part of the agenda of who's got the most sway, the most influence, the most money, the most political persuasion, the most powerful people in the areas to pull the agenda their way. And it may not just be one big agenda and one lot of people will pull in one way. I think you've got powerful people on both sides of it, and they are constantly at a war at the moment. And this is what you're going to get. You're going to get all of these activists effectively being employed by these people, and I think that's what you're seeing unfolding all over the world. I don't think a lot of it's genuine, although it does pull in genuine grassroots people, a bit like the yellow vests. I think there is a certain part of the French rural area people who can see that their life is going to come to an abrupt end with this immigration that's going on. They know full well that they're not going to be able to pay the taxes that Macron wants to hike on them, and they'll take their land, and that'll be them. And they'll use that land for the agenda of all of these people that are coming in and all the rest of it. So, but I do think there are genuine people in some of this activism who do actually give a toss, but they're the minority. But they get used and washed along with the political activists that are bought and paid for, and that's what I think of the whole lot, PJ.
All right, stuff. Cheers for that. Jouster. Still weird, Jouster.
Yeah, I'm still here, PJ.
Any thoughts? What to say?
It's complicated. The more you talk about it, there's more issues in it.
Yeah.
You know,
So you won't be able to answer the question that I put to panel then on who's guilty, Home Office or the Stansted 15? No, it's inconclusive for you.
It's inconclusive because you're getting into conjecture now, aren't you?
Yeah.
You know.
No worries.
Well, me personally, I'd say the Stansted 15 were guilty, but not of terrorism. I wouldn't put it down to terrorism at all. It's a ridiculous claim. They should criminal damage, aggravated trespass, endangering the safety, whatever, but not terrorism.
Well, it's mixed responses from panel today. I think we've got many different views on it, and Stav's suggestion of paid political activists with agendas getting convicted and doing prison. Where's that pattern ring a bell from? Yeah, well, anyway, we'll move on from that because that'll surely switch the topic if anybody gets the punchline to that. Anyway, any other thoughts? Otherwise, I think it's about time to wrap up. We've been on for an hour, just over an hour now, an hour and 12 minutes. So, final thoughts, and then we'll finish off. And William, if you're there, time to chirp up. Hello.
Yeah, my last thing I can say is just keep your eyes open and let your heart take you, because your mind will take you to crazy places.
Yeah. Well, if you're watching TV, it's almost guaranteed, isn't it, these days?
Well, there's an old saying as well. I can understand why some people, if they feel strongly one way or the other, might break the law to do what they do. And I think sometimes you've got to be non-conformist, depending on how tyrannous the state is and for what reasons. But I think you've always got to take a good, long, deep look at what you're going to do or what you intend to do and why you're doing it. And realize that if you do it, if you get caught, well, you've got to pay the consequences. That's just the way it is, I'm afraid. But I'm definitely not all for conformity, because I think people conform a little bit too easy. And when you conform too easy, it allows people to just, make all sorts of ridiculous laws and trample on your civil rights and things like that. So, in a way, I've got a level of respect for social justice warriors doing what they do, because I think it takes takes a lot of guts to do that, you know, because most people will just roll over and have their tummy tickled and just, you know, go along with what the law says or whatever, when it's not always just, as we know. So, you know, got to give them a level of respect for that anyway, but maybe not the wisest form of social justice warriors going, maybe not the sharpest pencils in the box, but at least they had a go at what they believe was right. And, you know, that's up to them, isn't it?
Yeah, well, I didn't really want to give my opinion with me hosting the show, but if I did have to give one, I would say that if I found myself in a situation like one of them people, especially the person who said they was born here, I'd want nothing but people to come and assist me in any way, shape or form. If the government that's meant to protect us is not there doing so. So I could see with what you're saying, Jeff. Home Office definitely has questions that need to be answered, and as for the Stansted 15, only time will tell. Maybe we'll return to this after the sentencing and some of the court transcripts are made available, if or all they ever are, because some of these terrorism offences get hidden away and not looked at, but who knows?
Well, thanks, PJ.
Are we all ready to wrap up then for tonight?
Yeah, thanks, PJ. You know, good show, mate, and it's quite informative to me because I didn't know anything about all that stuff going on.
No worries, cheers for that, Jeff. Well, thanks for coming on, guys, and William, last chance, if you want to unmute and say anything.
Cheers, PJ.
Alright, Stav, nice one for joining us. Alright, guys, until next week. I'm not entirely sure what the topic will be, but I better leave it till we go live because sometimes it doesn't always go according to plan.
How about socialist ideals and capitalist values? How do you get around that one? Just a thought.
Is that one for you to host? Maybe next week as a backup, if nothing else.
Well, I'll host it, but is there an answer to it? But there we are.
We'll debate it. We'll discuss it like we do and find out. You've got to rip it up and find out what's involved with it all, don't you? That's the only way we can get to the bottom of things. Alright, guys, till next week. Thanks for watching and stay tuned for more Axiom Flux.